questions. Welcome. So today's event is part of a month-long series of activities to mark Fair Housing Month. And Fair Housing Month is a time to celebrate the passing of the Fair Housing Act in 1968, which put into law critical protections against discrimination and harassment in housing, and also sought to repair historic systemic patterns of systemic housing discrimination. And it's also time to recognize that these inequities still exist, and it's a time to renew our fight for safe and stable and affordable housing for all. So thank you so much for joining us today. And the Fair Housing Month activities here in Vermont are coordinated by CVOEO in partnership with the Vermont Department of Libraries, the Vermont Library Association, Old North End Arts Center, Vermont Legal Aid, the Vermont Human Rights Commission, the Vermont Department of Housing and Community Development, and many other partners as well. And we're really grateful for the support of the Champions of Affordable and Inclusive Housing, a group of private housing providers, and also from HUD, which funds our outreach and education work. And so this month's full schedule of events includes all types of things. We have workshops and trainings, including a training that's happening right after this Fair Housing Friday on voucher discrimination presented by our friends at Vermont Legal Aid and the Human Rights Commission. And the timing overlaps a little bit, so I hope if you're able to, when we're done here today, you can jump onto that session. And Corinne, if you wouldn't mind putting a link to that in the chat at some point in case folks are interested. We also have 2 more Fair Housing Fridays scheduled. We have one on April 16th on equity and choice in Vermont housing, and the final Fair Housing Friday of the month, which will be on the 23rd, which is on the changing realities of housing after COVID. There are also a whole lot of book and film discussions hosted by our library partners all over the state, including a discussion on Race for Profit, which is hosted by the Blake Memorial Library, which will be happening at 4:30 p.m. today. There are also reading challenges and story walks and all sorts of fun and engaging library events. And the best thing is most of these events and workshops are held online, so you don't have to go anywhere. You can experience them from the comfort of your own home without mud season roads, and travel virtually all around the state. We also, as part of Fair Housing Month, have a fantastic community art project, the Heart and Home Community Art Project. And everyone of all ages and all artistic abilities is welcome and invited to make art expressing what home and inclusive communities mean to you. There's special prompts available on our website, and we also have art kits available for community groups and libraries. And on April 21st, there'll be an art workshop with Corinne, and also an open to all artist reception to share your work on April 29th. So if you check out our website at fairhousingmonthvt.org, you can see the full schedule of activities, and we really hope you'll join us for more activities too. So today, I have the extreme pleasure to welcome a very special guest for our Fair Housing Friday. Minelle Sarfo-Adu is a high school junior at Big Picture in South Burlington, and she started researching housing discrimination as part of an independent project, and we're so happy to have her join us for Fair Housing Friday today. But before I turn it over to Minelle for her presentation, we have some questions for you. We have a short poll that we'd love for you to answer. It'll just be 3 little questions. Can everyone see the poll up on the screen? So if you could just take a moment and answer these 3 questions, we'll leave it up for just a moment, for a minute or 2. This is such a wonderful technology. I love seeing the little bars move across as people answer the questions. Wonderful. It looks like there are just a few more people left to answer. Great. So I'll leave the poll open for just another 30 seconds for the last questions. Wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. So we will get started. So I will now turn it over to Minelle and take it away.
Yeah, so hello, my name is Minelle Sarfo-Adu, and I'm currently a junior in Big Picture South Burlington, as you guys already know now. But Big Picture is a self-directed, project-based, community-based learning program. It lets students focus on their interests while learning. And throughout my life, I've lived in suburban areas of Vermont, like South Burlington and some parts of Burlington. And when I joined Big Picture, I started an internship with a real estate investor named Michael Dumont. And so far, he has taught me lots of valuable information that I'm beyond grateful for. But through my internship, I realized there aren't many homeowners that look like me. And that realization really deeply caused me to feel bad. And my presentation is to bring awareness to the untold racial discriminations in housing and to teach others to learn, observe, and speak up on these discriminatory acts. So as I share my screen, I am unable to share my screen.
The host, are you the host or no?
Oh, let's see. So Minelle, you should be able to,
Okay, I think I am now.
You are able to share. There you go. There you go.
Oh, no, that's not supposed to happen. Yeah, so this is my cover page. And so this is what I'm going to go over in my presentation. What is racial discrimination? What is housing discrimination? What are the protections against housing discrimination? History of racial discrimination and data in Vermont. How does it affect my community? What does it look like? Solution/process, individual and community level, and how to get connected and learn more. So what is racial discrimination? This graphic does show other discriminations such as age, disability, sex, which are also illegal under fair housing law, but this presentation focuses primarily on the awareness of racial discrimination. So what is racial discrimination? Race discrimination involves treating someone differently because he/she is of a certain race or because personal characteristics associated with race, such as hair texture, country of origin, skin color, or other facial features. What is housing discrimination? Housing discrimination can take on many forms. It may happen when a landlord refuses to rent you an apartment or tells you it's unavailable when it really is vacant. It can also happen when a real estate agent steers you in a different neighborhood. It may occur when terms and conditions of your lease or financing are different from those of other people. Illegal discrimination can also happen in advertisements. Usually people are discriminated against in their housing search or in their buying process, but discrimination and harassment can also happen when people are living in their homes. So you may ask, what are some examples? Well, examples would be phrases like these. People who look like you cannot live here. You won't fit in this suburban neighborhood. You cannot live here because you have too many kids. The neighbors will not like the smell of your food. You have to speak English to live here. You will make the neighbors uncomfortable. No Section 8. You should look at neighborhoods where people look like you, and no people who wear hijabs can live here. So what are the protections against housing discrimination? First of all, just because the laws are on the books and discrimination is illegal, that doesn't mean it isn't happening. It happens all the time, but it isn't always obvious. Sometimes discrimination is subtle or embedded in institutional policies and community planning. But the protections are the Civil Rights Act of 1968, also known as the Fair Housing Act. It prohibits discrimination in sale, rental, and other housing-related transactions based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, and disability. In addition, Vermont provides an even greater protection, adding the protected categories of sexual orientation, gender identity, victims of abuse, sexual assault / stalking, age, marital status, and receipt of public assistance. The history of racial discrimination was a long history, but first to clarify, it did not start in the 1930s. This trails all the way back to slavery, but for the sake of time, I'm going to start with the 1930s. when segregation was very prominent. In the 1930s, there was a rise in home ownership due to low interest rates. This wasn't the same for African Americans, though. Deeds and covenants, land and zoning practices prohibited African Americans from receiving the same benefits as white people. African Americans were often denied from seeing homes in primarily white safe areas. African Americans ended up having to live in undesirable areas or neighborhoods labeled as hazardous to loan to. These acts happened in Vermont too. Mayfair Park, a neighborhood in South Burlington, recently uncovered a racial covenant to not allow any other race other than white live in this neighborhood. Now that covenant is no longer in effect. In 2020, the covenant was removed. In June 1933, a homeowners loan corporation came out with the redlining maps, which is labeled right underneath 1930s, which essentially said who was safe to loan to. Green indicates best and red indicating hazardous. The neighborhoods labeled as red were often minority neighborhoods and green being white suburbs. And in 1968, April 11th, is when the Fair Housing Act was signed to prevent housing discrimination, but that didn't stop it from happening. In 2021, people still don't know about racial housing discrimination or about their rights. So how does it affect my community? This graph is of the median income by race in Vermont. This graph is on Vermont as a whole. So please look at the arrow for the darker blue, the second bar. African Americans make $39,000 compared to white people who are making $62,000 and up. This is reflected by home ownership. White people have a higher median income and also own the most homes. This shows a severe wealth gap in Vermont. And though this is the median, the highest average income for an African American is still not even close to the lowest average income for a white person. Please look at the blue and the orange, which indicates blue as owner and orange as renter. This graph is of Chittenden County and Vermont. It represents the home ownership gap in Vermont and in Chittenden County. It also reflects the wealth gap in the previous slide. In home ownership, white people own the most homes and also have a higher median income, and compared to Black people who have a lower income and are mostly renters, according to this graph. Both graphs on each slide showed together, which show a wealth and home ownership gap. Plus, in Chittenden County, that is 83% of people of color not building generational wealth through home ownership. So what's the impact? Let's look at how this has played out around the country for generations. This is a comparison between a white child and a Black child. Starting on the Black child side, the left, throughout the 20th century, racist covenants or agreements were made so that Black families were segregated from white families. Often these Black families would live in horrible areas that are now considered ghettos or hoods. These areas were areas that were redlined, so banks would refuse to loan or give insurance to people who lived in these areas. Banks would consider them high risk or poor. We don't really know if Vermont had redlining, but other systemic racism exists. There were racist covenants in Vermont, and these hazardous condition neighborhoods would have had exposure to poor health conditions. These children ended up going to very bad schools with less opportunity for higher education. Also, their parents or their families would often not be able to pay for college, earn equity on their home, or build generational wealth. This process just repeats for their children, but with even less money, which will cause them to have to rent and never build generational wealth. Now, when we go over to the white family side, white families have the ability to live wherever they want and anywhere they can afford. No covenants or deeds said no to them, which caused these families to live on a good, safe side of town with big homes and wonderful neighborhoods. They send their kids to great schools in the area because more expensive neighborhoods equal better schools. The school gives children plenty of opportunities from internships to college preparation classes. And when students are ready to go off to college, parents can take out a home equity loan to help pay. Or parents can use the equity on their home to buy an even bigger house in an even better neighborhood with even better schools and more opportunities. This process is just repeated for their children's children with generational wealth accumulated through home ownership. So, solutions and process. If someone experiences housing discrimination, they can go through a complaint process. A typical process will include an investigation, sometimes lawyers, and a resolution. The complaint process. When filing a complaint, you can contact HUD, VTHRC, or Vermont Legal Aid. So HUD stands for Department of Housing and Urban Development, where they deal with complaints where federal laws are broken. Vermont Human Rights Commission is VTHRC, and either HUD or HRC will investigate, and they will talk with you and the person you feel discriminated against you and another witness. The resolution will, once they have investigated, they will find, if they find that you're discriminated against, they will help you find a resolution for the conflict. HUD or HRC can help file a lawsuit against the discriminators. Legal aid can also help you and represent you. They offer legal advice and help someone decide if they will file a complaint or not. If the case does go to court, they may have to pay money or equitable relief. It's important to know that the complaint process can take a very long time, and also only a small percentage of instances of discrimination actually get reported, and of those, only a small percentage actually goes to court. Also, when someone is facing discrimination in their housing search, their first priority is to find a safe and stable place to live, and they may not be willing or able to file a complaint. This may be made worse in a tight housing market where there's a lot of competition for rentals and houses for sale. And it makes it harder to investigate or prove discrimination. Punitive remedies would be punitive damage, money damages, or equitable relief. Sorry, it's such a hard word to say. So what are some community solutions? As a community, we need to learn more, make yourself aware, understand what's happening, and how it impacts the people in your community. Observe deeply, look more into the rules and practices in your community that affect how and where housing is being built in your community and who is where. And speak up. If you find unfair practices, speak up for those who can't speak up for themselves, and speak up against unfair land and zoning acts. And ask yourself, what kind of community do you want to have? So get connected. Here are some ways to get some education and to learn more. Workshops, oh, nope, April is Fair Housing Month, sorry. Workshops are offered, discussions, library events, and community art projects. Human Rights Commission offers complaints, investigations, conciliations, and education. Fair Housing Month of CVOEO, Champlain Valley of Economic Opportunities, it's a tongue twister, offers constellations, referrals, education. And Vermont Legal Aid offers legal information and representation, testing, and education. So thank you for all those that have taught me so much. But before we ask questions, please take a moment to answer some polls, some poll questions, and then I'll be ready for your questions.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Minelle. That was a lot of information packed into a short amount of time. So thank you so much for sharing that. And we'll leave the poll open for a minute or two. In fact, we could probably leave the poll open while we start the discussion too. And so I'd welcome folks to share your comments and your questions and your ideas. I was particularly taken by one of the last things you said, Minelle, which was what kind of community do you want to see? And I think that can really help guide us as we think about how to make changes in our community. So I'd love to open up the floor. Please either raise your hand in real life or hit the raised hand button on Zoom. Let's see, Dalila.
Hi. Hi, Minelle. I'm Delilah Hall. I'm the zoning administrator for South Burlington. Thank you for your presentation. It was really well put together and you covered a lot of information in a very short time. I would like to know, in your research into the topic, was there any process or program that you saw that is making an impact in reducing housing discrimination?
Well, oh, sorry, I just got a text. So, yes, the Fair Housing Project, the whole like April thing of just for fair housing, I love the idea of that. And I was like, oh, I'm going to present in April. It just goes together. Yeah, so I think that for Fair Housing Month, that's the best place to learn information. I love what Vermont Legal Aid is doing by representing people and just education and all that type of stuff. I just think more awareness would be better. Like just keep talking about it, even if people don't want to hear it, or if it gets annoying. I feel like sometimes you just got to engrave things in people's heads. But with like workshops that Fair Housing Month is doing, projects involving kids in it, helping the younger generation, I think that's going to be the best, because I mean, I do understand you guys are all older than me, so my generation does need to learn the most because you guys are their parents, or not their parents. You guys are their leaders, so just being good leaders and showing them like this is what we need to do so that they can take on that role when you guys are gone. But yeah, that's why I'm trying to present to students too, so that they can take on these roles and just be better and better and better and just keep growing. Because I think it's the only way to get rid of everything that's bad.
Thanks.
Other questions or comments? Maida.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Minelle. Good work. I wanted to ask, in the process of preparing your work, were you able to compile some anecdotal evidence through interviews or anything of that nature that give examples of lived experience in our region?
That was actually one of my roadblocks. I wasn't able to actually get people to be willing to speak on their experiences. And actually that ties in with my whole point of doing this whole presentation. People know that what's going on is discrimination to them. So that's why I want to bring awareness and give examples so that they know like, oh, well, this happened to me a while ago. I didn't even know. Like, I want people to know that sometimes they're being discriminated against and they don't even know. And also, another thing, I do want to respect people's privacy. So even if they did and I could find people, I probably wouldn't have taken, like I wouldn't have gotten.
Not use their names, no. You wouldn't have been even thinking of using their names or that sort of thing.
I wouldn't use their names or who their landlord was. I would like to keep it confidential because, as I said in the presentation, sometimes people's first priorities are getting a safe and stable home first and not focusing on what happened to them in discrimination. Yeah. And
understood. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mackenzie has a question, and then Vince.
Awesome. Hi, thanks for the presentation. So I kind of understand that sometimes there's a big stigma around reporting discrimination and kind of going through the process. And I was wondering if you bumped into any solutions to kind of decrease the social stigma of bringing discrimination issues to court and stuff like that.
To court. Wait, can you just like clarify a little bit more what you mean?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's a long process to bring discrimination like up to HUD or through VTHRC. And I was wondering if there's any ways that we could work to socially kind of make it more accessible for folks.
Well, if we just normalize the whole learn, observe, and speak, or observe, learn, and speak, then it would be more like socially acceptable. Just like there's a lot of things that are normalized right now that shouldn't be normalized, like racism towards Asians. There's a lot of there's normalization for that in at least for my teen group. So if we just normalize things like consent, that's normalized. Everybody knows you should give consent. I mean, get consent before you do anything, right? So if we normalize things like that, then it would just be easier to bring up. I guess that's the best way I can put it. I don't know much on the legal side exactly. I tried to learn more, but I don't have that much of a knowledge. So sorry if I didn't answer that correctly.
No, you're good. Thank you.
Oh, and Minelle, may I add a little bit to your response? Yeah, and I would also add, I completely agree with everything Minelle said, and would also add that raising awareness about the resources and services that are available through the Human Rights Commission, through Vermont Legal Aid, and through the Fair Housing Project is really important, because each of these organizations has staff that will work with people who are experiencing discrimination and help them fill out the paperwork to file a complaint and help talk through the process. And there's also a time period in which people can file a complaint. So someone can have up to a few years to file their complaint, so they can be in a safer, more stable situation, and then take matters to court. So there are a lot of supports out there. Thanks. Vince.
Yeah, I'll ask us, listen to the answer, and then I'm afraid I have to leave. Does anyone have any sense about whether housing discrimination in this area is worse in the rental market or in the buying market? Any idea? I mean, is it worse for renters trying to rent or for people who are trying to buy a home?
It exists in both areas, and it's worse for renters.
It's worse for renters. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
I can give a realtor point of view on that.
Okay.
I was going to say the same thing, just in my experience that mostly because a landlord has there's no one in between. So a landlord is in direct contact with the potential tenant. That means the landlord just knows more about that person. And tenants also, it just always feels like a much less formal process. And so I think tenants don't necessarily know, tenants aren't going to go into something being like, okay, I need to disclose only a certain amount. Whereas if you have a real estate agent and you're buying a house, and I want to say 90% of something like that sales, or someone's going through a real estate agent, you have someone advising you to be limited on how much information you give, and there are professionals who are somewhat better trained in fair housing laws than landlords. That said, one of the things that we've been talking about more in the National Association of Realtors has been talking about more, and then just a little committee that I'm kind of running over at KW is love letters, and this idea of buyers submitting with their offer a little letter about oh, I want my family to grow up here, or even things like religion. I mean, including a picture of their family, right? In which case, oh, it's a white family. And that certainly is playing a role, and is something that's been more openly discussed in terms of the fair housing violations involved in that in the past year. but I still would say, in my experience, like as both a tenant and a landlord and a real estate agent, it's definitely happening more often with renters. Again, just because there's like, like landlords are just less regulated. Like you don't have to have a license with the state to be a landlord. To be a real estate agent, you have to have a license with the state. So just, I don't know, I think for sale by owners probably are gonna have a higher likelihood because just like with a landlord, there's like that direct, you know, like I've talked to people who are selling their house themselves without a real estate agent because they're like, I want, you know, either I don't think that kids should live here or I want a family to live here. And then people don't like, they don't realize that they are also held to fair housing standards.
Okay.
Anyways, the short version of that is usually when a real estate agent is involved or like a third, like a middleman in any situation, in my experience, there's less likely to be fair housing violations.
Okay. Very interesting. Thank you very much. And I'm sorry I have to leave.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for that
Okay.
additional information.
Goodbye.
Bye. Do we have other questions for Minelle? John?
I'm just responding to Minelle's answer to the question about getting stories, you know, people's experience. And I understand the problem here, but I do think that there's a major issue with the public disconnect that, oh, this doesn't happen here. And I'm wondering if there are statistics without having any names that would be available from legal aid and from the state, specifically to Chittenden County, on how many cases that they review or hear in a year, and what some of the outcomes are. And that would, you know, if that could be publicized, it then puts to shame or lie the notion that, oh, we don't have any problem like that here. And I'm just this. I think that's a missing piece here if we're trying to get the public to really accept this issue.
I do think that there's actual data on Vermont legal aid that has how many people are discriminated against. But it's also, I think it's very old. I think it's from like 2014, if I'm correct. I did see it when I first started this project. I did see it, but I didn't think it was going to be as accurate because it was so long ago. So I did decide to stick with more accurate graphs with the who lives where and how much they're making, because those two just go together. But if there was more recent data on that, I would have put it in. I just didn't want to have people saying, oh, well, that was so long ago, so it's not even happening.
Yeah.
So I
Understood.
And I will put in the in the chat, I'll put a link to the Vermont Human Rights Commission's annual report from last year, which it doesn't cover just housing discrimination. It covers all of their cases. And there's a little bit of data in that related to housing discrimination, but you're absolutely right. We do need more and current data as well to help tell the story of what's really going on. Let's see, we have Helen has a question. Thank you, Helen.
Yes, well, first, Minelle, thank you. I think it was a great presentation. Really appreciate the fact that you're concentrating on this in South Burlington. While we don't see the statistics or know about it, I have no doubt that we participate in this too, discrimination, as we've seen in so many parts of the country. I just want to point out that there's a bill that's going through the legislature right now. It may have an impact on educating landlords about fair housing. And it's kind of indirect because it's really about safety in rental housing. We have so many mom and pop landlords, as someone else mentioned in their comments, who don't really understand what their rights and responsibilities are. And if this bill passes, it would really require the state to do more toward enforcement of the laws that are already in effect and provides an opportunity for education. more so than we have now. So I don't know if you're aware of that, but Minelle, but I think it's good for everybody to know. It's passed the Senate and it's now in the House.
Thank you very much, Helen. And let's see, we have Dr. Childs had her hand up. Dr. Childs, did you have a question?
I do, because
Yes.
when we're talking about data, it's very hard because South Burlington doesn't have a big, doesn't have enough houses to buy right now. So that data would be skewed. And my thing is, this is a great topic. And I wonder, because I am a person of color, what will happen if I go to someone who owns land and decide not to sell to me? Should I just take my other friend that looks like them? But yeah, it is a major concern because I've been looking for land in a house for almost 3 years. So this is a very important topic. And thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Childs.
Also, another thing, oh, so sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go.
I
Go ahead.
just wanted to add, South Burlington is also a very expensive place to live. It took my family so long to find a house here, but it has a great school district. So they kept pursuing it and trying to find a great place to live, and now we have one. But it took a really long time, and it's just very overpriced. Recently, there was like a new neighborhood on Dorset Street that it's like condos, but they're $500,000. And I was like, oh, okay, like, and since I'm interested in real estate, I'm always looking at new markets, new neighborhoods, and all that types of stuff. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like, no, not living here. So I can just feel for minorities right now that are actually trying to live in a great neighborhood or community, South Burlington, and can't find a place because there isn't much affordable housing here, or any actually. I don't even, it's, yeah. So that needs to change, but I mean, obviously I'm only 16, so I can't really change it right now, but hopefully it does change.
Well, I have confidence that if anyone can change it, Minelle, it will be you. And let's see, next we'll go to Leslie and then Chris.
Thanks, Jess, and thank you, Minelle. That was so interesting. And I just really, to build on what we were just describing, I was wondering if you have ideas about how you might take what you learned in this process and continue to try to improve racial equity and racial outcomes in Vermont and South Burlington. What are your next steps?
So my next steps are, I'm going to focus on students now, because focusing on adults was great for the first part, but you guys will be going soon and I have to give it off to the next generation. So I am I'm working with a current studies class right now and adding the Color of Law book into the curriculum so that students will grow up knowing like what's going on and not have like quote unquote whitewashed history anymore. I want them to have more of a diverse history. And yes, and yeah, I just want to bring that into schools, and I'm working with the Anti-Racism Network. It's a student network, and I'm helping them get the book into a bunch of high schools and hopefully middle schools too, so that students will obviously learn. And then I'm also going to teach them the solutions that I learned through my project with the Learn, Observe, Speak Up, because it's such a simple phrase and people can just use it and not even have to think twice about it. And that's just my next steps for students. And my next steps with adults, while I'm working with the Student Anti-Racism Network, we're going to be trying to, well, I don't really know yet if we're going to be trying to get a bill out to make the book in all history classes, because the school districts in Vermont are very iffy and don't always follow the same curriculum every school, which is good and bad on sometimes, but I don't really know my next steps for those for adults, but for students I have a clear straight path.
Thank you. That's a lot. We are so glad you're here and doing good work.
And Chris.
Thanks. Hey, Minelle, it's great to see you again. And I hope you, after you've digested some of the solutions here, we would love to reserve some time with you on the Affordable Housing Committee to come back and present maybe some of the solutions that you heard from the community and how we can make a difference here in South Burlington. It really struck me what you talked about is the availability of affordable housing, especially when you talked about the early in your presentation about the different income levels and the home ownership gap. Being able to move from renting into home ownership and build that generational wealth. How are you supposed to do that when there's not that home ownership inventory in the community that you want to live in? So it's just, I'm really glad you highlighted that. And, we look forward to working with you to help make a difference in that area. So thank you for increasing awareness on that. Much appreciated.
Thank I'm sorry. Do we have any other questions or comments?
Yes, if you may. A comment or a suggestion and a question. Just maybe suggestion that came to mind in terms of Minelle, like thinking about, who can you reach to make a difference? I think that coordinating with college campuses might be helpful as well, because in my experience watching, I didn't go to college in Burlington, but I know, but I did, I had my own rental issues, but I certainly know from my brother's experience as a renter in Burlington as a college student that especially if you aren't from the area and don't know anyone in the area, you end up with this terrible landlord and you have no idea what to do about it. And that's how you establish your entire understanding of renting, is when you're you still don't even know really how to be an adult. So anyways, I feel like that's the kind of college student population might be a really good group in terms of people who are, both, finding college students who are excited about doing that activism work with you and have the time and excitement to do that. And those might be the populations that, our current really renters are going to be, renters for a little while. Those are people that could really use the education. And, some of them, I just know that there's so many that just put up with really terrible landlords and terrible conditions. And they just don't know what to do because they, this isn't their community, or I think they usually don't think of it that way if they're not from Vermont. And I had a question about curious if there's any, if there's data about once there actually are complaints filed, how often there's any kind of resolution, how often does that just get, kind of settled or mediated? How often does it actually, how often do people actually get a monetary reward, or how often is there, is there ever criminal prosecution of landlords from that? Just curious the outcome of even the very few times that people actually do report.
Yeah, those are, and Minelle, would you like me to answer that one? Those are really good questions. And so, as we mentioned earlier, it's hard to get good statistics. A lot of times when a case does go to court, the information about that case isn't public, and a lot of times things are settled before they go through the court process and the documents are sealed. So I don't have good data for Vermont. Nationally, I believe the figure is 1% of reported cases of housing discrimination go to court. So that's tiny. And we know that of the instances of discrimination that are happening, only a very, very small percentage are reported. So once you factor that in, it's a very small percentage. And there are, the penalties can be pretty harsh. There can be huge monetary penalties in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Here in Vermont, they're usually in the $10,000 to $30,000 if there is a monetary penalty, and also landlords and other housing providers can be asked or forced to undergo training to do affirmative marketing. So for example, if someone has been discriminating against someone based on their receipt of public assistance, so like a Section 8 voucher, they may be required to advertise Section 8 welcome. And so there are some more creative ways to penalize housing providers that are discriminating too, that can increase in education. But that data gap is huge. The Fair Housing Project, in partnership with the Vermont Human Rights Commission, later this summer will be launching a community survey to try and document to get more data about the amount of housing discrimination that's out there that doesn't get reported. So it won't be a scientific study. It'll be a community study where we're asking people to self-report their experiences, and both anonymously and if they're willing to include their information for follow-up. But we're hoping just to paint a better picture of what's really happening out there and to help raise awareness about the fact that it is still happening. Let's see, Ariel.
Hi, yeah. So one thing I just want to mention is that immigrants often have a different financial structure when applying for a mortgage. Many of them, because of racism in the housing market, are self-employed. And so the mortgages are often kind of skeptical of homeowners who want to base their income on self-employed income. And then that actually, so a lot of the immigrant population borrows from family members, which again is kind of frowned upon by the housing, mortgage housing lenders. So there's a program actually in New York City, and it's called Neighborhood Housing Services. And what it is basically a housing program geared towards immigrant first-time home buyers. And it also includes classes on learning how to fix up your own home by yourself. And they have a certificate program. So it's kind of a all-in-one inclusive thing. So I would actually say that if we want to encourage home ownership among a more diverse population, that maybe rethinking the way that we approach mortgages and the way that we can provide support for people that don't actually even have that generational knowledge of how to fix things in your own house. Because, I would know because my father did it. I watched him do it, and he was taught by his grandfather. So if you're just starting off fresh, dealing with the plumbing, you actually need some more supports that way. So that's just my kind of comments coming in. Just I don't mean to get us off too much off the topic.
Thank you, Ariel. That sounds like a great program. We'll have to research that. Very, very good point. Let's see, I think we have time for one more question. Good. Minelle, do you have any final words to share?
Yeah, so I just want everybody to leave with just thinking, what kind of community do you want to have? Just ask yourself that question, answer it in your head, and then try to improve your community based on your answer. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Minelle. Thank you everyone for being here. And Minelle, thank you so much for all your hard work and your just diligence and thoughtfulness and your advocacy. It gives me hope for the future. So we really look forward to hearing more from you. And for everyone who's on the call, this has been recorded, and so we'll be posting the recordings on our website. And thank you for all the work that you're all doing to increase the amount of safe, accessible, and affordable housing in South Burlington and around the state. And please join us for more Fair Housing Month activities. Thank you all so much.
Great job, Minelle.
Have a great day.
Thank you, Minelle.